Okay, let me just begin. So you first have to find the amplitude. The amplitude is simply just the coefficient of the trig ratio, which is cos 2x. So the coefficient of cos 2x is 1. So that is our amplitude. And then the period, you simply just divide 2 pi by the number that you have, which is the coefficient of x. So when you divide 2 pi by 2, we're getting 2 as our period. We're getting pi as our period. And then from there, we can now find the shift. So we only have the vertical shift, we don't have the horizontal or the phase shift. So the phase shift is found by equating what you have there to 0. So we equate 2x to 0, then you remain x with x is equal to what? 0. So this is the phase shift. And then the the vertical shift is simply just found by, so the vertical shift is simply found by getting what you have there. So you have 1 there, and hence this is going to be equal to, so we just say y is equal to 1. Okay. So y is equal to 1 there. So the other thing that we need to find is, I think these are enough. We can just draw the table of values. Yeah, we can just draw the table that we're going to use, that is going to help us to sketch. Yeah, so we just have to draw the table that will help us to sketch. So how do we draw that table? So how do we draw that table? It's simple. Yeah, so we draw, okay. I was just doing something, sorry for that. Okay, so we draw the table. We have something like this. We have x there, then we have f of x there. So if I put okay, before I start putting the values there, I have to find the values that I'm going to be putting there. The values that I'm going to be putting while there's x there. How do I find those values? These are the values that I'm going to put there. Now, how do I find those values? Simple. You simply just divide the period by 4. So the period we have is pi. So if I divide it by 4, I'm going to get pi over 4. So meaning the distance from one point to the other will be equivalent to pi over 4. So pi over 4 plus pi over 4, I'm going to get pi over 2. Then pi over 2 plus pi over 4. So I'm going to get 3 pi over 4. And then 3 pi over 4 plus pi over 4, I'm getting pi as the answer. So now I have to use these values. I have to put them where there's x to get the points that I'm going to use. Of course, the vertical shift I have is 1. So I'll put my 1 there. So if I put in 0, if I put 0 while there's x there, if I put 0, 2 times 0 will give me a 0. Of course, 0 is simply just 1. 1 minus 1, the answer is 0. So my first point will be at the origin there. And then if I put pi over 4 while there's x there, I'm going to have 2 times pi over 4. That will give me 2 times pi over 4. That is simply just going to give me pi over 2. So cos pi over 2 is simply just the same as cos 90. Pi over 2 in degrees is 90. So cos pi over 2 is just the same as cos 90. Yeah, so cos 90 is 0. So we are going to have 1 minus, this part has given us a 0. So 1 minus 0 will give us 0, will give us 1. So we have our next point being there. And then the other point is found by replacing pi over 2 in this same expression. So if we put pi over 2 where there is x, so if we put pi over 2 where there is x there, we'll get 2 times pi over 2. So 2 times pi over 2 will give us pi. Then cos pi is simply just the same as cos 180. So cos 180 is -1. So the absolute value of -1 is +1. So 1 minus +1, the answer will be what? 0. So we have a 0 there. So we have our other point to be there. So the table of values, I'm not even updating it. Yeah, so if we put 0 there, we're getting a 0 as the answer. If we put pi over 4, we go to 1 as the answer. And then after putting pi over 2, we got 0. Then after putting 3 pi over 4, if we put 3 pi over 4 there, we're going to get 3 pi over 2. So 3 pi over 2 is simply just the same as 3 times 180, which will give us 3 times 180 gives us 540, divided by 2, we'll get 270. So this is just the same as saying cos 270. So cos 270 is 0. So 1 minus 0 will give us what? So we're dealing with 3 pi over 4. So 1 minus 0 will give us 1. So we have another point in the same line as 1. Then here at this point, we get pi. If we put pi where there's x there, we're going to have 2 pi. So cos 2 pi is the same as cos 360. So cos 360 is 1. 1 minus 0 will give us 0. So we have another point there. So when we put pi, we're getting what? 0. So since this is a cosine graph, so we're going to draw it like this. We expect it to come out like that, and then to go down like that, and then to be like that. That is how it's going to be. So that is our first revolution. Okay, so we move to the next question. So we move to the next question. So the next question is this one. So this one is also very simple. The question is, state the period, amplitude, the phase shift of each function below, and sketch the curve. So this one is straightforward because we've answered some of those questions on question 9. So I expect this one to be a simple and straightforward question. So I'll be a bit fast in terms of solving it, but if you don't understand any point, you simply just tell me or ask me to repeat. All right, so this one is the simplest on this question. So we have y is equal to -2 cos x over 2. So first of all, we find the amplitude. The amplitude is going to be +2. It's going to be 2 because that's the coefficient of the trig ratio. And then the period is simply found by dividing 2 pi by the coefficient of x is 1 over 2. So when you divide 2 pi by 1 over 2, we're going to get 4 pi. So this is the number of units that it's going to take to complete one cycle. And then apart from that, we find the shifts. So the phase shift is found by equating what is in the brackets, which is x over 2 to 0. When you cross multiply, you get your x to be equal to what? 0. Then the vertical shift is going to be found by checking what is in front, what is either this side or this side. But in this case, we don't have anything. So we say y is equal to 0 as well. So sketching this curve is simple. So we're going to have something like this. We have a 0 there. Then to find the numbers that I'm going to put this side, I'll simply just divide the period by 4. So when I divide the period by 4, I'm going to get, so 4 pi over 4. This will give me what? Pi. So 1 unit there will be pi, will be equal to pi. The next one will be 2 pi. The other one will be 3 pi. The other one will be 4 pi. So now we can start putting in the values. So if we put, so we have x there, then we have f of x. So if we put x where there is, if we put 0 where there is x, if we put 0 where there is x, we put 0 where there is x there, we're going to have 0 over 2, which will give us 0. So cos 0 is 1. So 1 times negative 2 will give us what? Negative 2. So we'll have our negative 2 somewhere there. And then when you put pi while there's x, you're going to have pi over 2. So pi over 2 is just the same as 180 over 2, which is 90. So cos 90 gives us what? 0. 0 times negative 2 will give me what? 0. So we have another point there. When we put 2 pi there, we're going to have 2 pi divided by 2. That is going to give us pi. Then, so I'm not writing the values. So we have negative 2 if we put 0. Then we have, if we put pi, we have 0. Then if we put 2 pi, it's just the same as saying, if we put 2 pi there, it's just the same as cos 180, which is just the same as cos pi, times, so cos pi, which is cos 180. Cos 180 is negative 1 times negative 2. We're going to get positive 2. So we have our positive 2 there. So we have positive 2 there. So you continue like that. Yeah, so you continue like that. You discover that if you put 3 pi there, you're going to have cos 270. Yeah, so cos 270, which is just the same as cos 3 pi over 2, which is cos 270. So cos 270 is 0. So you expect the point to be somewhere there. And then when you put 4 pi there, you get 2 pi. Cos 360, 2 pi is just the same as it's just the same as 360. So cos 360 gives us what? 1. 1 times negative 2, you get negative 2. So you have another point there. So you expect your curve to come out like that. So this is how your curve is going to be. We quickly move on to this one, which is part B. Okay, so part B is also simple. So we have y is equal to 1 plus 1 over 3. Then we have sine, then 2. 2 times x, we're getting 2x. 2 times pi over 2, we're getting pi. So I've just simplified it in advance. So I've multiplied the 2 to everything in brackets there. So this is what we have. So first of all, we find the period. We find the amplitude. The amplitude is equal to the coefficient of the trig ratio, which is 1 over 3. Then the period will just be equal to, so the period will be equal to, you divide 2 pi by the coefficient of x. The coefficient of x is 1 there, so we get 2 pi as our period. And then apart from that, we get the phase shift. So the phase shift, you equate what is in the brackets there to 0. So what is in the brackets is 2x plus pi. So we have 2x plus pi. We equate this to 0. Then when you take this to the other side of the equal sign, you find x is equal to negative pi over 2. So this means that the curve is going to shift 2 pi. It's going to shift pi over 2 times to the left. In other words, this is going to be our starting point. And then the horizontal shift, the vertical shift is going to be y is equal to 1 there. So we can start sketching the curve. So we expect this to start from where? From pi over 2. From negative pi over 2. This is where we're starting from. And then it will end at pi over 2 because the period there is what? 2 pi. So how do we now find the points in between? So the points in between, we know that the points are supposed to be 5 at, they're supposed to be 5. How do we find the points in between? Remember I said you divide 2 pi by 4. So if we divide 2 pi by 4, so if we divide 2 pi by 4, we're going to get pi over 2. So pi over 2, so negative pi over 2 plus, okay, so if we divide this by 4, we're going to get pi over 2. So negative pi over 2, let me do this. Before I write this number here, because it will, okay, let me just do that. So like I said, we're going to start from negative pi over 2. Okay, so to find the points, we're going to divide, pi over, 2 pi, which is the period, by 4. So when you divide that, we're going to have pi over 2. So pi over 2, so if we start from 0 there, we're going to have pi over 2 as our first point there. So let me just write it there, pi over 2. And then we'll also have pi over 2 plus pi over 2. This will give us pi there. And then plus pi over 2, it will give us 3 pi over 2. Then we also have 2 pi there. Okay, so let me just move this point a bit closer to the 0. So we have negative pi over 2. So from there, we can now start sketching the curve. So we can now start sketching the curve. Then before we start sketching, we can write our axis there, the principal axis, which is 1. This one, you get it from there. So if you write your 1 there, you can now do what? You can now find the maximum point at which the curve is going to go and the minimum point by just adding 1 to the amplitude. So when you add 1 to the amplitude, 1 plus 1 over 3, you are going to get 4 over 3. So 4 over 3 will be expected to be somewhere there. And then the other point that we're going to have is the lowest point, which is going to be 1 minus 1 over 3. 1 minus 1 over 3 will give us 1 minus 1 over 3 will give us 2 over 3. So I'll write it somewhere there. Okay, so having found these points, we can now do the sketching. So if you want, you can draw the table of values, but you can just observe the sign that is in front of the trig ratio. You even know how the curve is going to come out. So we know that a sine curve is always like this when it's positive in front. Then when there's a negative in front there, it always starts like that. So since we have a positive in front, so we expect it to start from this point, which is this one. We said it's going to start from where? From x is equal to negative half. So we expect it to start from there, and then it will go up. It will go up at that point. Or if you want, what you can just do is to put in the values that you have down. So if you put negative pi over 2, when you put negative pi over 2 where there's x there, you get the value of you get the value in the brackets there to be negative pi plus pi, which will give you a 0. And then you know that you know to say sine 0 is simply just 0. So 0 plus 1. So 0 plus 1 will give you 1. This is where this point came from. Then we move on to the next point when you get a 0 and replace it where there's x there. So when you put it where there's x, you're going to have 2 times 0, that will give you 0. 0 plus pi, that will be pi. So sine pi, which is just the same as sine 180. So sine 180, this will be a 0. So 0, yeah, so this will be 0. So 0, okay, let's see. Yeah, so it will be a 0. Okay, so 0 plus 1. Yeah, so 0 plus 1 to still give us what? 0. How is this coming out? Let me try to check it. Okay, so we have 2x there. Let's try to look at the period. So the period is 2 pi. Okay, so this is what we have. All right, so let's try to put x as 0 there. So we expect to have another point there. And then we also, if we try to put x to be pi over 2 there, we put x as pi over 2, we'll have pi plus pi, that will give us 2 pi. So sine 2 pi, which is the same as sine 360, to also give us a 0. So also expect to have another point there. So this implies that we need to also have some points there. And then how do we get these numbers? So we are going to have negative pi over 4 here. Then we'll have positive pi over 4 there. So what I've just done is just to find the half of pi over 2. Half of pi over 2, that is pi over 4. So if you try to put negative pi over 4 there, you're going to have sine 270. No, if you put positive pi over 4 there, that's when you have sine 270. Yeah, that's when you're going to have sine 270. So sine 270, which is the same as sine 3 pi over 4. So sine 270, it will give us negative 1. So you have 1 minus 1 over 3. So 1 minus 1 over 3 will get our point to be somewhere there. Remember, we said 1 minus 1 over 3 is 2 over 3. So this is the point that we're going to have. Then when you put negative pi over 4 there, where there is x, you're going to have negative pi over 2 plus pi, and that will give you pi over 2, which is the same as sine 90. So sine 90 give us positive 1. So 1 plus 1 over 3 there, because this will give us 1. 1 times 1 over 3 to give us 1 over 3 plus 1. This will give us 1 over 3 plus 1 to give us 4 over 3, which is there. So expect our curve to come out like that. Yeah, so what this implies is that when finding the period, I think we're not supposed to multiply these two. Let me do this. This is the thing that I've just seen right now. So it means that when finding the period, we were not supposed to multiply okay, yeah, no, it was just okay. It was just okay. The problem I made was after multiplying here, I didn't get the coefficient of x to be 2. I got the coefficient of x to be 1. I got it from here instead of getting it from there. So I was supposed to divide this by 2, not 1. So when you divide this by 2, the period was supposed to just be pi. So the period is pi, not 2 pi. Yeah, this is why we made the mistake. So the period is just supposed to be pi, not 2 pi. Yeah, because you divide it by the coefficient of x there. So the period is pi. Then after finding the period, which is pi, to find the points that we're going to put there is, what you need to do is to divide this same pi by 4. So meaning the distance from there to there should be pi over 4. The distance from there to there should be pi over 4. The distance from there to there should be pi over 4. The distance from there to there should be pi over 4. This is now making sense, yeah. I wanted to get surprised. How is it that we found pi over 2 to be the distances there, but the curve is just ending within pi over 2. It's just within this period here. Yeah, so this is the correct thing that we've done now. So the only mistake that we made was on finding the period, right? So let's move on to the last question there. And it's already 20 hours, so I'm sure this will be the last question for today. Okay. So we quickly begin. So this one is also simple. You multiply the pi throughout the brackets like we did on this one. So we have y is equal to, I'm using y instead of f of x. And I think I can leave this one as your exercise. You just follow the same steps that I did here. Let me just show you how to do it, then you'll finish it up. So we have 2 sine. You open the brackets. So pi times x, we're getting x pi. Then pi times 1 over 4, we're getting minus pi over 4. So we have this in brackets. Then we have minus 1. So meaning the period there, let me use white. So meaning the period there is going to be equal to what? The period, remember what I said? The period should be, first let me start with finding the amplitude. So the amplitude is simply just the coefficient of what? The coefficient of the trig ratio. So this would be 2. And then the period is going to be equal to, you get 2 pi, then divide it by the coefficient of x there, which is pi. So if I divide this by pi, it means that the period is what? 2. And then the shifts. So we start with the first shift. So the first shift, you equate what is in the brackets to 0. So we have x pi minus pi over 4. You equate this to 0. Then when you take this to the other side of the equal sign, you have x pi is equal to pi over 4. When you divide by pi, you get the value of x as 1 over 4. This is the shift. And then the vertical shift, simply just get what you have here. So the vertical shift is y is equal to -1. So from here, I'm sure you can easily sketch the graph. Yeah, so I think I'm leaving it here so that you can also have something to do as your task. So you can sketch the graph just using these points that I've shown you. So I want this work to be submitted tomorrow. So you can do it either tonight or tomorrow and then submit it. All right, thank you very much for watching. See you next time in a meet.